Good. So welcome everyone to Velocity's webinar, 3 Lessons Learned, Guiding Safe Implementations. And if we go to our next slide, we are going to get to see the fabulous Mike Hall. So Mike is one of the senior Agile coaches here at Agile Velocity. He has been in product development for the past 35 years and has a wealth of Agile experience to share, which he brings to all of his coaching, including he's led seven Agile transformations, including 3 safe ones. He is our go-to guy for all things Scaled Agile Framework, and we are super lucky to have him on our team. A couple fun facts to know about Mike, because we might as well just keep embarrassing him a little bit. Mike is a big Dallas Cowboy fan, so, you know, yay for football, Dallas Cowboy, and of course, the North Texas Mean Green football. My favorite thing that I discovered about Mike is his passion for classic rock music, and specifically the Doobie Brothers. He and his wife, Kelly, like to travel to see them. So it's been fun to hear about their travels, including Vegas, to see the band play. So Mike is an all-around fabulous guy. Again, we're so lucky to have him here to talk about safe and some safe implementations. So
Great.
welcome, Mike.
Okay. Thank you, Carrie, for that introduction. A quick story about the most recent Doobie Brothers concert in Las Vegas. My wife and I flew up there in February of this year. And 3 hours after arriving, we received an email saying that the concert was canceled due to illness of some of the band members. So we kind of missed out on that one. So folks, thank you for taking time out of your schedule today to join us. I sincerely hope that each and every one of you are handling this COVID-19 virus situation as best you can. A little bit of technology today. After we look at the safe big picture, we're going to do a quick poll. So if you'd like, go ahead and launch a browser with pollev.com/velocity, or just text the word velocity to 22333. And then when it comes time for the poll, I'll ask the question and you can enter a single word for that, okay? So here's the Safe 5.0 big picture, the full configuration. Hopefully you're familiar with various aspects of the diagram. 5.0 was announced in October of 2019 at the Safe Summit, and it has significant improvements in the areas of business agility, 7 core competencies, and the introduction of customer centricity and design thinking at the essential level. And they've made tremendous progress on addressing customers and the crucial aspect of full business agility. And frankly, as I read the articles on each of the 7 core competencies, well, I would describe them as great. So if you haven't had a chance to read those, definitely please do it. So here's the poll question I have for you. Thank you for already jumping in there. What was your first reaction when years ago you first saw the safe big picture? And so if you would just answer that question. Oh, we do have one rule: no curse words. So keep it clean, but just type in a word which indicates your first reaction when you saw that safe big picture. I'm going to pause for just a minute and see some of these words coming in, and then we'll pick up after everybody's had a chance to answer the poll. Yeah, I love that one. Wow. Okay. Still coming in. Yeah, ideally one word. If you type in multiple words, it will split them up. Yeah, overhead. Yeah, SAFe can definitely look somewhat complex, or I like to use the word comprehensive. It's really designed to cover most types of situations. Intimidating. Yeah, I think that's a common feeling that most people have when they first take a look at it. It's like, oh my gosh, I'm going to be expected to learn how this works. Complex, complicated, all the C words. Yeah, lots of process, big process, intricate, interesting. Okay, good. All right. Well, thanks. Yeah, just wanted to kind of get a word cloud view of your impressions of when you first looked at it. And, at this point, I'm going to tell you, do not start an agile transformation using SAFe. I just said that. Don't start an agile transformation using Nexus. Don't start an agile transformation using Scrum at scale. Don't do it using disciplined agile delivery. Don't do it using less. Just don't. So that leads into lesson 1, which is starting with a scaling framework, lessons learned 1, starting with a scaling framework instead of desired outcomes can lead to unpredictable results, and in particular, business outcomes. So the SAFe framework has these 4 configurations to choose from, ranging from essential SAFe to portfolio SAFe, large solution SAFe, and full SAFe. It's all about roles, events, artifacts, cadence, prioritization, lean economics, collaboration. These are all really good things. And SAFe also informs us, it lets us know that there's some potential business results that have been obtained based on their case studies shown on the right. But the question I have for you today is, does it guarantee that these results will be achieved? Will they just magically appear once SAFe is fully implemented? So, how do you get from starting a SAFe transformation to these business results? What is this Candyland circuitous path to get there? And so, does starting with SAFe guarantee these outcomes? The answer is no. What if you're shooting for a different business outcome? Look at that diagram. It talks about time to market, engagement, productivity, quality. Those are all great, but it's not a comprehensive list of potential business outcomes. For example, if your business outcome was to gain more predictability, well, what then? I'm going to implement SAFe, even though there's hardly any case studies out on the SAFe website about that, and their main diagram doesn't say anything about predictability. What about if you want an increase in innovation, in creativity, and learning organization? Well, good luck. What about customer satisfaction? Well, good luck. Why would you even consider SAFe if there's no evidence of leading to these business outcomes? And thinking like that is putting the cart before the horse. So starting with a scaling framework and expecting it to achieve some glorious business outcome is backwards thinking. So don't start with SAFe. So what should we start with? We should always start with a business outcome, not a framework. And you may have multiple business outcomes that you're starting with. So start with a goal or a desired outcome, communicate that goal, organize your work efforts and people and structures around the pursuit of that goal. And your business outcomes should, at a very minimum, be SMART: specific, measurable, attainable, realistic, and time-bound. And frankly, they should also be inspiring. Like, take a look at the last business outcome listed there at the bottom right. Imagine if it said something like, increase our customer NPS score to 85 a 20% increase within 6 months so that we become known as the #1 preferred supplier of choice. So it adds that inspirational type of element into it. Now, here's some common categories, if you will, of business outcomes. I've pulled these from our Agile Velocity Path to Agility, but you'll see some pretty common things that you're aware of, like speed, predictability, market responsiveness, and customer satisfaction. So, always start a scaled agile transformation with a good business objective or business outcome. Make sure it's specific, measurable, and inspiring. And if you know you're going to go safe because it's a popular scaled agile framework, then you've already told me, or I bet you've already indicated that just implementing SAFe will not necessarily lead to your desired business outcome. So, and you shouldn't put the cart before the horse. So it begs the question, what's missing? And so what I would submit to you, that what is missing is a small collection of what we call agile outcomes, different from business outcomes, but agile outcomes that heavily influence the business outcomes. And underlying that, within each agile outcome, are some underlying technical capabilities that deal with roles, events, artifacts, and specific constructs like that. And then by implementing various recommendations and practices within SAFe, that forms that top line, which actually is a good example of what we will typically do during an agile engagement. We will, it's always good to start identifying the business outcomes needed for the organization, and then hold discussions about what are the types of agile outcomes that will influence those. And as an example, an agile outcome might be a short quality feedback loop. Another one might be a predictable delivery cadence. Another one might be released continuously. Another really popular one is ability to forecast. And then underneath that, what are the technical practices that need to be instantiated within your culture in order to make those agile outcomes become real? And then finally, what does the scaling framework say about that? And if you'll do it that way, then you'll find that your SAFe practices will actually enable your agile capabilities, and your capabilities will drive your agile outcomes, and your agile outcomes will influence and help accomplish your business objectives. Again, if you just come up with a business outcome and throw a scaling framework at it, good luck. Who knows where you're going to land? And this is what I like to call the connective tissue of an agile transformation. It's a set of agile outcomes and agile capabilities. Let me get into it just a little bit more as we cover off this first lesson learned. So at Agile Velocity, I mentioned we have this transformation framework called Path to Agility. It has a number of agile outcomes, and we've organized them across 3 rows here: team, system, and org. And we've also organized them across 5 different columns representing, I'll say it's stages of maturity, of agile maturity. So for example, look at the align column. And in the system row, there's an agile outcome called teams aligned to value. And this is, just as emphasized by the new Lean Agile principle in SAFe 5.0. Look at the learn column. In the org row, you'll see team empowerment. This is where leadership lets go of the daily minutia They finally trust their teams and they empower them. You know, at first glance, you might think team empowerment is really more appropriate at the team level, but we have found in our transformations that it's more at the org and portfolio and leadership level that that comes into play. And then finally, look at the predict column. In the team row, there's predictable delivery cadence as an agile outcome and quality feedback loop, or even shortened. Now, our first case study is a 120-person shared services org providing technical services to the rest of the company. This organization is filled with very talented engineers, but unfortunately, the customer perception is that the org is slow, consistently misses dates, low communication to the portfolios. In effect, this shared services organization is an agile release train flow inhibitor instead of what SAFe says about shared services, that they should be art flow enablers. And the reality is, after our initial assessment and observation, we found a very siloed organization with massive handoffs, unengaged employees, and plans based on wishful thinking instead of empirical evidence, and also significant technical debt. So after observation and discussion, the following 4 business objectives were identified: customer satisfaction, speed, predictability, and employee engagement. And obviously we had SMART and inspiring objectives associated with those. Let's take 2 of those and just take a further look to see how business outcomes actually can map to agile outcomes. So let's take the business outcome speed and mapping that to agile outcomes. Look at the team row. There's predictable delivery cadence, there's reduced cycle time, and there's releasing continuously. Those are all related to speed of delivery. At the system level is an agile outcome called faster time to value. So kind of a higher systems level view of things that we see at the team level. And then even at the org level, there's ability to focus and decision agility. So those are some example agile outcomes. This is not meant to be prescriptive. You can definitely come up with your own. We have these already based on numerous years of supporting and leading agile transformations. But the concept behind it is to put in some good type of thinking about that so that you can do the map from a business outcome all the way to your scaling framework. Let's look at employee engagement. At the team level is one called Team Form, which is about establishing working agreements and the team owning the improvement of that. At the system level is teams aligned to value. This one is so crucial, from an employee engagement perspective. And actually many of the other business outcomes, you will see this agile outcome replicated in there. And then at the org level, for employee engagement, we have agile leadership and obviously team empowerment. Okay, well, underneath each agile outcome is a small set of what we call agile capabilities. Think of this as a decomposition of the agile outcome. Whereas the agile outcome is a little bit high level, the agile capabilities are more specific and more about the technical practices that we would expect to see and get instantiated during a transformation. So the teams aligned to value agile outcome has the following 3 agile capabilities: value streams identified, teams aligned to value streams, and clear value proposition. Now, mapping these to SAFe. So for the agile capability, value streams identified. What does SAFe say about that? SAFe says hold value stream workshops. SAFe says consider operational and development value streams. And SAFE says be sure to map that out and make sure the awareness of the value stream is at all of your levels, whether it's portfolio, large solution, or essential. Now, what does SAFE say about teams aligned to value streams? So the mapping is about organizing around the flow of value, forming agile release trains or ARTs consisting of cross-functional agile teams. More about that later. And using minimal component teams and evolving cross-functionality in order to reduce dependencies. And finally, clear value proposition. What does SAFE say? It says you should have team charters complete with working agreements, and even weighted shortest job first prioritization helps identify clear value and flow of value. Even the PO sync event, setting the vision capability within the spanning palette or using that appropriately at all of the levels, and then even setting business value within a PI planning session. Let's do a quick look at one more Agile outcome, and then we'll wrap up this first lesson learned. Predictable delivery cadence. And 3 Agile capabilities are shown here. The potentially shippable product increment, which is my personal favorite. Second one is forecasting or accurate forecasting. And then third, limiting width. So what does SAFE say about a shippable product increment? Well, it says every team builds a PSPI every iteration, and to use XP practices to ensure the right level of quality. There should be a system demo every 2 weeks of integrated efforts across all teams in the arts, and then a final program increment every 8 to 12 weeks. What does SAFE say about forecasting? Well, create a roadmap of 3 PIs, where the first PI is the committed PI. It's the one we're working on right now. But the other 2 PIs beyond that are forecasted. SAFE also says a lot about forecasting ethics and into the next year or 2 also. And then also the use of normalized story points, being able to aggregate those up so that we can get some form of program and portfolio level velocity and metrics at all levels. SAFE says, what does SAFE say about limiting width? Well, Kanbans at all levels, backlogs at all levels, and pull only when capacity becomes available. So the takeaway, the lesson learned is don't start with a framework. Start with a business outcome and spend the necessary time to map your desired business outcomes into a set of targeted Agile outcomes and capabilities in order to know what parts of your chosen scaling framework to implement. If you will do this, 2 things will happen. Number 1, the chance of you hitting the business outcome goes up significantly. Number 2, you will also tailor down and customize this SAFE beast to a subset of what is truly needed. And that doing that should help your initial reaction to the SAFE big picture when you first saw it, and it seems overly complex, complicated, overwhelming, things like that. So tailor it down, customize it, and get a lean approach to achieving your business outcomes. Okay, let's move on to lesson number 2. The number of ARTs launched is a vanity metric. Case study. Our second case study is a huge Fortune 50 health insurance company. If I mention the products that they create, you would know right away who I'm talking about. They provide popular insurance products directly to consumers and governmental agencies. This company began a massive SAFE implementation 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now, and is still continuing it today. Their initial measure of success was number of Agile release trains launched. And so, as you might suspect, using a vanity metric like this caused some very interesting behaviors. So, Art 1, their first Agile release train, was launched and was successful because it spanned many parts of the organizational hierarchy and it broke down some significant silos. So, great success on Art 1. Art 2, the second art, was launched and it too was successful. It spanned a good many parts of the org hierarchy and it broke down some of the silos, but probably not as much as it could have. Well, you see where I'm going with this now. Art 3 was launched, but notice how the value stream across the org was limited to a restricted portion of the org. Well, it begs the question, why? Well, all kinds of reasons. The other part of the organization has a pressing delivery and can't take the time hit. The other VP is too difficult to work with. We've never done it that way. Just insert your own reason or excuse right there. So human nature kicked in. Because the major metric was number of arts, VPs were launching arts by simply holding a 2-day planning event and calling it PI planning, and then checking the box that said, we launched our art. This allowed them to keep working exactly the same way that they were working before. There was obviously no real lasting change with this. And as a result, only a few of the 55 arts were really focused on improving the business outcomes. Many of the subsequent arts had to be redesigned and relaunched to a meaningful construct. And it involves significant additional cost and latency of value delivery to the customer. So arts are designed specifically to span organizational verticals where it makes sense, and in many cases it makes sense for all verticals to be involved. It's very important to get it right or close to right, as that serves as the primary construct of delivering value. And it should be as close to concept to cash as possible and extend the value stream rubber band to include all aspects of product delivery. So here's the takeaway for lesson learned number 2, avoid vanity metrics. Vanity metrics will cause undesirable behavior. And what to measure instead? Well, measure quality, your defect leakage. Measure your average feature cycle time. Measure your art predictability and team predictability. Measure your ability to adapt. And it also bears mentioning that release frequency is also a good metric as long as your end user can take frequent releases. Okay, let's keep moving. Final lesson learned, number 3, launching arts without forming cross-functional teams is what I would call cargo cult agile. So what is cargo cult agile? This means the org is going through the motions without understanding why. It got its name from a phenomenon of pre-World War II South Sea Islanders who believed that, so the Americans came in and established a base there. And of course, they brought in their airplanes and jeeps, and along with them, all of these wonderful American things like food and beer and cigarettes and chocolate bars and things like that. And after the war, when the Americans left, some of these islanders believed that they could build mock-ups of the airplanes and construct dirt runways, and that in doing that, it would bring back all of the wealth that accompanied the U.S. troops. As I mentioned, food, rations, beers, cigarettes, and chocolate bars. And they thought by reconstructing these artifacts out of wood, then they could effect the occurrence of the good things that came along with them. So our goal as Agilists is to avoid, or should be, avoid cargo cult adoption of Agile. We don't want to emphasize the going through the motions of the events, artifacts, and roles. We want long-lasting change for the better. So final case study here, our third and last case study, 300-person product development org within a large US-based airline. Great group, dynamic, loads of talent. ARTs were launched with all component teams instead of cross-functional teams. Why? They had just reorged a few months ago and were experiencing change fatigue. Well, what happened? Here's a picture of the Agile release train with all component teams, where the color is associated with the technical components that are being built by that team. Well, what this particular Agile release train experienced is that the teams were just naturally focused on quantity of output, building more and more components, very little or no integration with other teams, and an overall de-emphasis on the delivery of value. The system demos were not held, or if they were held, they were just a repeat of the iteration review where each team goes. So instead of showing an integrated product increment at the system level, each team was just showing their component progress. And I like to call this progress instead of product increment. There was, once again, big bang integration and big bang final QA at the end. And every iteration, well, the teams are agile, right? They're using iterations. Well, not exactly. You can do all of your development using iterations, but if you're deferring integration and final QA and you're not producing a product increment every iteration, I'm sorry, folks, you are not agile. So don't get into this situation. This situation has been given various other names, maybe Scrum or Fall or Wagile, or a whole host of other things. It's really another important note here, though, is that integration, deployment, and release can be accomplished within an ART, even with component teams, but believe me, it will always be a struggle. Why? Because component teams just naturally think about local optimization instead of system optimization. So they naturally de-emphasize what matters most, integration and production of a fully tested, fully integrated product increment each and every iteration. So, SAFe, well, let's start with Scrum. Scrum at the team level requires cross-functional teams. So you'll see at the team level there, various folks of different skills and truly cross-functional teams. So Scrum requires that. And SAFe at the scaled level requires cross-functional teams of teams. And while there may be few exceptions allowed for component teams, it should be the rare case. Maybe 90% cross-functional, 10% component. And with cross-functional teams and cross-functional team of teams, then continuous integration and the creation of that seemingly elusive product increment every 2 weeks becomes the ART's norm. So, the final takeaway, don't scale Agile until it's working well at the team level. Do not scale Agile using component teams. Remember what SAFe says, don't scale crap. Okay, A couple of extra credit, 3 tips for staying on the path, and these are real short. The first one is about the system team. The system team in SAFe is responsible for creating and maintaining the all-important integration environments needed for these multiple teams within the ARC to come together every iteration and produce a valuable product increment each and every iteration. And yes, that increment typically spans work across multiple teams, as it should each and every iteration. So form your system team early and issue the challenge. Number 2, job titles such as project manager, delivery manager, release manager, program director, all of those. Where do they fit in SAFe? Well, SAFe has certain roles defined. What you will want to do is map existing job titles into the SAFe roles. So that mapping, you can pull from the SAFe collateral and share information about the different roles needed, and then hold workshops, which is what we did with our clients specifically about this concern, where we looked at existing job titles and responsibilities and just mapped those into the SAFe roles. And we got a pretty good mapping and ran with it. The only problem was we did this in about month 5 of an Agile transformation. And that led to a tremendous amount of confusion and frankly, anxiety within the org. So my advice is do this in month 1, month 2 at the latest of an Agile transformation. And then finally, number 3, tailor and right size your SAFe implementation downward by thinking about business outcomes and mapping those to the SAFe framework constructs. And the way you can do that is think about Agile outcomes and the capabilities as connected tissue. Here's a quick look at our Agile Velocity Path to Agility 5 stages. The first is align, and this is all about identifying those measurable business outcomes and its associated transformation roadmap. You know, the good thing, this just came into my mind, if you will spend time mapping out the Agile outcomes and the underlying capabilities, that actually becomes your transformation backlog. In Align, this is also about formation of an Agile leadership team within the organization so that they can take ownership of the transformation. Second stage is called Learn. This is about, training, yes, but it's also about establishing some of the foundational Agile practices, iterations, cadence, potentially shippable product increment, daily stand-ups, Kanban, Kaizen, things like that, and getting getting the teams to take ownership of that and empowering them to do so. Third stage is predict, and this is about maintaining or getting a predictable cadence of delivery going, focusing on the product increment, and doing accurate forecasting so that you can make informed business decisions. Fourth stage is accelerate, and this is all about optimizing the full value stream and shortening the overall time to market. How? Through DevOps, continuous release, practices such as that. And then finally, fifth stage is adapt, and this is about embracing enterprise-wide agility in order to quickly respond to market demands. So, thank you for your time today. If you would like more information, just reach out to info@agilevelocity.com. Also, a plug for Coffee with Coach Carey on Thursday of this week. That link will also be in the follow-up email. Folks, you do not want to miss that. She's going to give some great advice, and I would be shocked if you come out of there with less than 5 gold nuggets.
Thanks for putting me on the spot,
Sure.
Mike.
Well, like they say, Carrie, payback is hell. So, okay. All right.
We've got some questions.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So our first question is, what correlation have you seen between the number of SPCs and the success of a transformation?
Oh, um, you
And then
know,
it's a two-part question. Do you
yeah,
want
yeah.
now or?
No. I want to stick with the first part
Okay.
first. I'm going to answer that question. First off, it's a very interesting question. I'm going to answer it this way. It's quality over quantity. And I'm not bashing my fellow colleagues, um, but I think we've all seen transformations that, had 20 SPCs or 15 SPC coaches in there and frankly did not get a lot accomplished, and guilty as charged. But um, you know, you want to go with a reasonable number of SPCs, but they should all be top quality SPCs. And also, the other thing I would add is, how critically important agile transformations are. Go after a good mix. Make sure most of your SPCs have tangible experience with successful agile transformations, and maybe just one or two new SPCs that don't have a lot of experience under their belt, but it's kind of like a first round draft choice for the Dallas Cowboys or something like that. So you want really a small number of SPCs, but they're heavy on practical experience doing agile transformations. Okay, second part.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. The second part is, what were the experience levels of the SPCs that have made a positive impact? And I think you might have touched on this already.
Yeah.
Anymore?
Yeah. So the experience level, in my experience, what I've seen, the experience level of the SPCs, 3+ years or more of transformation experience. Those folks have probably been through 2 or 3 agile transformations, or in a good spot to make a statement like, I've seen most of everything so far. So chances are I can coach or help guide an organization when that inevitable situation comes up. So I would say 3+ years or more experience. But again, many agile transformations are large, and you'll need a good collection of SPCs, maybe 10 or 12, something like that. And so obviously some of them you'll want to have tons of experience, 5 or more years of experience in agile transformations, and a handful of them around the 2 to 3 year range, and maybe 1 or 2 that are relatively new, and get a good mix like that, because diversity of opinion is really important anytime we're coaching a transformation.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike.
Sure.
Alva has a question here. What do you think about the roadmap proposed by SAFe? Have you used it, and how have you used it?
Yes, we have used it in in the um, in the 3 safe transformations I've been involved in. We have used it, and verbatim, I would say no. There's always situations where you might want to do specific role training earlier than what the implementation roadmap says, and also there's probably times even after the art has kicked off where you want to do some additional leading safe training. Maybe there's some new executives or things like that. So I don't think it's meant to be a prescriptive step 1, step 2, step 3. It's treated as a guide, and then adjust it to the reality of your situation. Um, Now, obviously, it is sequential in certain aspects that you have to launch an art, you know, before you can start thinking about sustain and improve and moving beyond that. So, actually, I think SAFe 5 has a new phrase for sustain and improve. Now that it comes to me, I think it is accelerate. So things like that. Use it as a guide, but pretty much try to stick with it, because that was created based on the Scaled Agile Inc. SPCs and SPCTs experience. Okay.
Awesome. Okay, so Joe says, when you're first introduced to classic Agile, you learn that normalizing points is an anti-pattern. So what's the argument you can make against that?
Okay. Yeah. Excellent question, Joe. Gee, I wonder if that's my old friend Joe asking that question. I think everybody knows who I'm talking about. Okay, so obviously we know that when teams are using relative size estimation and doing story pointing and velocity, it's a team only measure, if you will. It only makes sense within the team. So when you think about scaling um, Agile and going to a team of teams system level model, we need some way to aggregate um, this concept of velocity and estimation up to the program level, because arts are all about team of teams. So here's what SAFe says. It's not the same as the team anti-pattern, where you're looking at velocity and story point estimates across teams. It's actually very different. What SAFe says is each team should normalize, should find a story in their backlog that is small enough to be developed and fully tested within one day, um, and give that the estimate of 1. And so each team on the art does that. And that sets a baseline for each team. They have they have their own story, which they have estimated to be a 1. And then each team, just within their team, they go off and do relative size estimation for all of the stories within their backlog. And team B does that also. They have their normalized story at 1, and then they look at their team B backlog. They relative size estimate all of those. Now, what SAFe says is this: if every team has that normalized baseline at 1, then since all those teams participate on the art, then we can aggregate story points up to the program level, the art level. So for example, if a feature is being developed by an art and it's across 2 different teams, then the story point estimates associated within those 2 teams can be aggregated to come up with a story point estimate for that feature. And there's a lot more involved, and an SPC would probably have to take an hour or 2 to explain it, but there's also a concept of when epics and features are first identified, that there's a short discussion amongst the system architect, the team leads, this person, that person, subject matter expert here and there, where a rough story point estimate of the feature or epic comes out of that discussion. And then as work is decomposed in PI planning or even a priori, whatever the team's come up with as their relative size estimates within their teams, those numbers are aggregated and compared to that original preliminary estimate. And then once work is decomposed, that's probably a better estimate. Then that estimate is used to replace the original feature estimate. So, man, I know that was a long answer, but a really in-depth question that is deserving of an hour or two. So there is no intent by SAFe to violate the fact that relative estimation is a team-only function. All SAFe is trying to do is to get everybody to normalize on the same baseline that story point estimate 1 is equal to 1 day. And their theory is that if every team will do that, then we can do these higher level aggregations of story points, and that can lead to a program level velocity.
Nice. We have 2 more questions, and Fernando, if you don't mind, I'm going to hold yours to the second because I think it's fun. But I'm going to ask Brandon's question because it's right in line with what you've been talking about, Mike. If you are normalizing points to aggregate for an art, then do you recommend the quick start method at PI planning over actual velocity?
No. And I'm hoping this is the Brandon that I know, because he and I have had several conversations about this. The quick start, and thank you, Brandon, for asking this, because he probably remembers how passionate I got during this animated discussion. The quick start approach from SAFe is not associated with normalized story points. Let me say that again, because unfortunately in their training, they have the quick start approach and normalized story points on the same slide. So it implies very strongly that they're related, but they're not. So the quick start approach. This is only for teams, new teams that have come together that do not have that do not have a known velocity. Sometimes when we form new teams, those teams don't have a previous velocity. So how do they do iteration planning? Well, what SAFe says is use this magic formula, 8. 8 times the number of developers, which also means QA, which also means technical writers, etc. So 8 times the number of people on your team that are actively involved in developing. And so if you had a team with 5, a new team with 5 developers, 5 times 8 is 40. So start with that as your planning velocity for iteration 1. Now, chances are in iteration 1, your team will deliver less or more than 40 story points. That becomes your empirical data evidence. And let's say at the end of iteration 2, we demo and we delivered at the end of iteration 1, we deliver 23 story points. That is our new team velocity, 23 from that point forward. And then of course, it changes over time. But as soon as you have empirical data, you will want to replace that starting point of the quick start. So you'll notice as I described that, I didn't say anything about normalized story point estimates. So don't confuse the two. And just to finish the thought, the normalized story point estimates is what I just described earlier. Each team decides which story represents a one-day effort, and that's their baseline for moving forward.
Awesome. Thanks, Mike. Our last question here is, of course, equally important. Thank you, Fernando, for asking. Mike, what is your go-to Doobie Brothers karaoke song?
Oh my gosh. I've only sang karaoke once, and we all lived to talk about it. It was horrible. You know, I have such a strong Texas accent, but so my favorite song by the Doobie Brothers is called "Long Train Running," and you know, it's one of those songs where you barely hear that name in it one time, but the rest of the song is all about without love, without love. So you would think it would be called Without Love, but it's the name of the song is actually Long Train Running. And if you go see the Doobie Brothers now, today in concert, man, ever since year 2000, a sax player named Mark Russo joined the Doobie Brothers, and their music is so much better than the original recordings. They have these sax solos integrated through most of their songs now, and this saxophonist, Mark Russo, is just absolutely incredible. If you're a musician and you know what a high C note is, okay, he hits that with regularity, and it's just awesome. And you know, the new technology used today makes these 70s bands music sound so much better.
Oh,
Thanks, Fernando.
yeah.
Thanks, Fernando, for the softball.
Yep. He says his favorite is Desperado. So,
Oh, I think Desperado is an Eagles song, isn't it?
oh, maybe. Maybe. All right. Well, we are at our time. And I thank you so much, Mike, for sharing your experiences of safe implementations with us. This has been awesome.
Thank you.
And as Mike mentioned, the information, a recap of today's session will be shared via email, and the recording will come out. I think I misspoke. It's not this afternoon. It'll be early next week. But the summary recap will come as well with some of the links that Mike talked about. So thanks again. Thanks, Mike, and thanks for everyone for joining us. Stay healthy and be agile.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.